Good morning. It's so good to be here together, worshiping Jesus. Thank you, worship team, for leading us. I love the words to that song, Hosanna to the Lamb that was slain, Jesus who died and rose again. Do we have the live stream up today or not? It's not up, so for all of those of you that I was going to welcome to the live stream, never mind. But the rest of us are here today, gathered to just draw near to the throne of grace and to hear from God. We're back in the book of Joshua chapter 8. For those of you that looked at last week's bulletin and said, I'm really excited to hear from Sam Beachy today, I'm sorry. I'm not Sam Beachy. I would have actually enjoyed that a lot too. Sam Beachy is a dear brother. I'm sure he would have some really deep insights to share, but I think that was a misprint, but that's okay. Joshua chapter 8. We're picking up the story, if you remember, I think it was probably 3 weeks ago that we were last in Joshua 7, and Joshua 7 is a really heavy and sort of a sad account of the power that sin has to bring defeat and for a moment, just so many repercussions of that, the way it affected the entire nation of Israel and the defeat then against the city of Ai, but also the sadness of the cost of purging sin in that case with Achan and his family. But now we're back into chapter 8. And at this point in the story, Ai is still there. So the battle was lost. There was a defeat. I think 30-some soldiers were killed in that. And Joshua and his army had to retreat. But now it's another day, and the army is still there. And I was praying about what does this look like application-wise for us. These stories in the Old Testament are beautiful, but there's a lot of things that we can draw on that are part of our story and our walk with God. Ai wasn't going away, just like enemies don't. So here the nation of Israel has crossed the Jordan. They're advancing to what was the promised land, what God had said, I'm going to give it to you. But he had told them very specifically that you must drive out these nations, because if you don't, eventually the gods they worship will become the gods you compromise with and worship, and it will seriously affect the glory of God being established in the nation of Israel and all the things that were going to follow. So he said, you must drive them out. And there's so many things about that, because as we walk in faith with Jesus and we walk in obedience to him, there are these victories that need to be, these battles that need to be fought and victories that need to be won. And sometimes we experience defeat. And we can't run at that point, and we can't walk away from it. We have to go back and re-engage, just like they did. A couple of questions I just wanted you to sort of ponder, maybe sit on for a bit today. What does defeat look like in you? Are there ever times where the people that love you, that are closest to you, look at you and they can tell by the look on your face that you're kind of defeated? I know that's true for me. But what does that look like for you? What are the circumstances that lead you up to feeling really defeated? Are they often the same ones? Same kinds of patterns? Sometimes defeat looks like anxiety. Just being caught up in this feeling of being overwhelmed sometimes, worried about all that life carries and feeling like you can't handle another thing. Sometimes it's anxiety about what people think about me and feel about me and say about me. Sometimes it looks like depression, just this deep sadness. And I know that if you've ever grieved the loss of somebody close to you, it's easy to have these repeated patterns where you're just in deep, dark places, and it can feel really defeating. Sometimes it looks like every time certain circumstances are forming in your life, you find consolation in something that is actually really destructive for you and sometimes for the people around you. But there's these patterns that if we look carefully, we can probably all say, yeah, this thing kicks me pretty consistently, and I feel really defeated. AI represents for us an enemy that has defeated us, perhaps more powerful than we originally thought. Remember when Joshua first looked out there and saw that city after the battle at Jericho? He was like, a couple thousand people, this should be a piece of cake. But remember, not only did he underestimate the power that they held, he also neglected to seek God's direction because of that underestimation, so he wasn't aware. He didn't ask God, so he wasn't aware that there was sin in the camp. And because of that, there was a very bitter defeat. I want to, at the beginning, before we get into Joshua, just read this one verse from 2 Corinthians chapter 2. I feel like maybe I should apologize for always speaking from 2 Corinthians, but this book has been so alive to me over the last probably 4 or 5 years, and I keep going back to portions of it. This is what Paul says. But thanks be to God who always leads us in triumphal procession in Christ, and through us spreads everywhere the fragrance of the knowledge of Him. Is that beautiful? It's not our work, it's God's work. But thanks be to God who always leads us in triumphal procession. And that's so important because there are seasons in our life where we just kind of settle for whatever that defeat is. And we probably even sometimes say that's just the way the world is. And we've all gotten beat up by life and sin and other things, and this is just what we have to settle for. It's not true. Triumphal procession. Thanks be to God. He is able to do that. God's work in me and God's work in you is a work of triumph over whatever plans the enemy had carefully laid to destroy us. That is His work. That is what He will accomplish. We can be confident in that. If you feel defeated today, please don't also feel ashamed and discouraged or guilty, because these are often the very things that set you up for staying defeated. Reach out. Reach out. Even now, God, what do you want to show me today about victory? Because God is a God of promise, and He's given us, I believe, in this story, kind of a model for victory over our enemies. So let's dive into it. 5 different things that I just think are part of the model for winning battles, but also living in victory. And the first one, before we even read from Joshua 8, and you can put that up there if you want to, but the first one is repentance, because the first step to overcoming the enemy, which was AI in this case, is back in the end of chapter 7. It's allowing God to show us where the sin was and repenting of that. Psalm 66:18 says this: "If I had cherished sin in my heart, the Lord would not have heard me." And I challenge you with that, because there are, as we come into God's presence on a daily basis, Sometimes we're aware of these things that are like, oh yeah, this place I had a bad attitude, or I did this, and there's this time of confession which is really healthy. But there's also this cherishing of sin at the core that sometimes we know exactly what God said about something, and we just don't want to let it go. And we hold on to it and we cherish that sin. That is a place from which you may not as well go into battle against your enemy, because you will lose. You have no strength, because you have disconnected from the power of Christ at that point. And it's so important that if we cherish sin at some place, that we are willing to stare that down and then offer it up and be willing to die to that. And that's really symbolically what happened in Joshua 7, because Achan not only committed a sin, but he loved the things that he held on to. He cherished them. And Israel needed to be purged of that, just like our hearts do. And then we get into the story, and I want to read the second part of this model for overcoming our enemies is faith. Joshua 8, I want to read verses 1 through 3. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged. Take the whole army with you and go up and attack Ai. For I have delivered into your hands the king of Ai, his people, his city, and his land. You shall do to Ai and its king as you did to Jericho and its king, except that you may carry off their plunder and livestock for yourselves. Set an ambush behind the city." So Joshua and the whole army moved out to attack Ai. He chose 30,000 of his best fighting men and sent them out at night. So the second kind of step in this model for victory is faith. Be strong and courageous. Where did you hear these words before? Where did Joshua hear them before? At the very beginning, when he became the leader of the nation of Israel, God said that to him because he doubted his own ability to lead. But now he's back in that place of defeat. And he's feeling all the same things, probably, and more, that he did when he first was going to try to cross the Jordan. So God says to him again, patiently, be strong and courageous. Don't be discouraged. I have delivered your enemy into your hands. Why would Joshua need to hear that again? What had just happened? You had a humiliating defeat. You have I think it was 36 men who had been killed because he did not inquire of the Lord. So now he carries the weight of blaming himself probably for what had happened, at least to some degree. That's a hard thing. If you're ever in a position of leadership, whether it's in church or in business or everywhere, when something goes wrong, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's so easy to feel like that was my fault. Now I need to carry the weight of that. And I'm sure Joshua felt some of that. It was my fault. At this point, he needed to be encouraged just to even take the next step. John says in 1 John, "This is the victory that overcomes the world, even our faith." That word is faith. It takes faith to re-engage with God's promise, to go back and say, I believe you. When he says, I have given you the victory, to believe that that is true when we're feeling something else. And while it is God's power that brings victory, it is our obedience because of our faith. Okay, God, I'm going to take you at your word. So I'm going to act on this because you said it. I believe that what you said is true. Faith and obedience that follows it. And because of that, Joshua and his men moved into action. They moved out to attack. That was an act of faith. Third, we get into strategic obedience. I'm going to read through the whole chapter, about half of it right now. So just listen, engage in it. I know sometimes when we read a large portion of Scripture, it's easy for your mind to wander. If it helps you to pull out your own Bible and follow that way, do that. But it is actually very important. When we get to the end of this very thing happens with the whole nation. Joshua is reading a large portion of the law, and everybody's listening. So there's value in it. So I encourage you to just listen and let God speak to you. Beginning in verse 4, with these orders, listen carefully. You are to set an ambush behind the city. Don't go very far from it. All of you be on the alert. I and all those with me will advance on the city. And when the men come out against us, as they did before, we will flee from them. They will pursue us until we have lured them away from the city. For they will say, they are running away from us, as they did before. So when we flee from them, you are to rise up from ambush and take the city. The Lord your God will give it into your hand. When you have taken the city, set it on fire. Do what the Lord has commanded. See to it. You have my orders. Then Joshua sent them off, and they went to the place of ambush and lay in wait between Bethel and Ai, to the west of Ai. But Joshua spent that night with the people. Early the next morning, Joshua mustered his men, and he and the leaders of Israel marched before them to Ai. The entire force that was with him marched up and approached the city and arrived in front of it. They set up camp north of Ai, with the valley between them and the city. Joshua had taken about 5,000 men and set them in ambush between Bethel and Ai to the west of the city. So picture it kind of in your mind. They had the soldiers take up their positions, all those in the camp to the north of the city and the ambush to the west of it. So you have two different sides of the city. If I can find my spot again. That night Joshua went into the valley. When the king of Ai saw this, he and all the men of the city hurried out early in the morning to meet Israel in battle at a certain place overlooking the Arabah. But he did not know that an ambush had been set against him behind the city. Joshua and all Israel let themselves be driven back before them, and they fled toward the desert. All the men of Ai were called to pursue them, and they lured Joshua, and they pursued Joshua and were lured away from the city. Not a man remained in Ai or Bethel who did not go after Israel. They left the city open and went in pursuit of Israel. Third step in this model for victory is strategic obedience. And I say that because often what God asks us to do is very specific. There's a strategy behind it. There's an acknowledging of what the enemy's tactics are like and who he is behind it. So the obedience was very specific, very strategic. Your enemy, Satan, who has defeated you in the past, yes, we acknowledge that. He is not omniscient. He does not know everything. He is also not omnipotent. He is not all-powerful. Sometimes we cower in fear because we remember the defeats and we think that he is much more than he is. He does know our patterns. He does know our weaknesses. But he calculates without God's power in us. Just like the king of Ai calculated without God's power in the equation. He remembered these people running and being afraid. So he expected the same thing to happen again. I'm going to go after them. This time, we're going to take these people out completely. And because God knew that, the step of obedience was, let him come. Let him feel like he's pushing you back and winning the battle. Set up the ambush. Be obedient. The elaborate plan worked to perfection, because God knew that the king of Ai was overconfident and because Joshua obeyed. Again, Joshua probably had a superior army to the army of Ai. Humanly, it would have been so easy for him to say, I've got something to prove here. I lost this battle before, it's not happening again. I think he could have come up with his own plan to attack this city and prove that the first time was a fluke. He was ready for his rematch, probably, humanly speaking. But he didn't go there. He said, I'm going to do exactly what God said. I'm going to lure the enemy out, and the rest of the plans that God had given. He obeyed every detail. And that's important because God always gives us enough clarity to obey. And if we're confused and we're saying, I don't know what to do next, it's most likely that we just don't want to do what God says. Because God gives us clarity. He shows us, this is the step. This is what I want you to do. If you really want to overcome, this is what I want you to do. Are you willing to do it? And then we wrestle with him. And then we're confused. Know who your enemy is. Know that he is not more powerful than your God. Greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. This is true. Also know your own weaknesses. This is part of the strategy. I don't know what Joshua and his men, his army felt when they saw that same king approaching them. It may have been a moment of PTSD. Here's this guy again. Last time we faced him, all of these things happened. A lot of people died. We lost the battle. They had weaknesses. The power was not in them, it was in God. Know your weaknesses. When are you most vulnerable? We talked about that at the beginning. What sets you up for patterns of defeat over and over? Do you know? Are you aware of that? Have you ever mapped it? What are the things that set you up? Be aware of that. That's part of the strategic obedience. We all have places of vulnerability. And this is important because expect your enemy to expose your weaknesses until you are aware of them and rely on obedience to God's power instead of your own strength. Expect him to do that. He'll expose it over and over again. Then we get to the fourth point, and that is striking at the roots. We'll keep reading in the story. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Hold out towards Ai the javelin that is in your hand, for into your hand I will deliver this city." So Joshua held out his javelin toward Ai. As soon as he did this, the men in the ambush rose quickly from their position and rushed forward. They entered the city and captured it and quickly set it on fire. The men of Ai looked back and saw smoke of the city rising against the sky, but they had no chance to escape in any direction, for the Israelites who had been fleeing towards the desert had turned back against their pursuers. For when Joshua and all Israel saw that the ambush had taken the city and that smoke was going up from the city, they turned around and attacked the men of Ai. The men of the ambush also came out of the city against them, so that they were caught in the middle, with the Israelites on both sides. Israel cut them down, leaving them neither survivors nor fugitives. But they took the king of Ai alive and brought him to Joshua. When Israel had finished killing all the men of Ai in the fields and in the desert where they had chased them, and when every one of them had been put to the sword, all the Israelites returned to Ai and killed those who were in it. 12,000 men and women fell that day, all the people of Ai. For Joshua did not draw back the hand that held out his javelin until he had destroyed all who lived in Ai. But Israel did carry off for themselves the livestock and the plunder of the city, as the Lord had instructed Joshua. So Joshua burned Ai and made it a permanent heap of ruins a desolate place to this day. By the way, the name Ai means a heap of ruins. I don't know if that was a prophetic name, because I think it had that name before this event happened. He hung the king of Ai on a tree and left him there until evening. At sunset, Joshua ordered them to take his body from the tree and throw it down at the entrance of the city gate. And they raised a large pile of rocks over it, which remains to this day. Striking the enemy at the roots. For Joshua and his army, overcoming this king and his army were not enough. Just winning this battle in the valley outside the city was not enough. They had to strike at the roots, their home, where they lived, their city. Otherwise, in some years, a new army could have formed that would have come against them again. I love the scene from The Hobbit. Any Hobbit fans here? You guys like the Hobbit movies? Oh, there's a lot of you, a lot of us. I can easily spend some hours and just enter into that story. It's so powerful. But there's one scene in particular where Gandalf is speaking, and I'm completely drawing a blank. The Hobbit, what's his name? Bilbo. Thank you. Bilbo asks him, "Where's Thorin?" And he says, "Thorin took his best warriors to cut the head off of the snake." That's getting to the root. And that was the head off of the snake being the orc army, and the head of it being their commander who is terrorizing and who was so powerful. But he went to cut the head off of the snake. Sin is so deceptive. Do you agree with that? We often look at patterns of sin and we ignore the root things, the root causes. In the case of our repeated patterns of defeat, we have to look at the root things in ourselves, because it is that place of vulnerability that Satan tries to hit over and over again. In myself. I don't think this is so popular today. It's really easy to say, I struggle here because this happened to me as a child. Is there truth to that? Absolutely. Is it the only truth? Probably not. I struggle here because my spouse makes me feel rejected, or because this other thing is happening. Is there some truth to that? Yeah. But is it the root? Probably not. And there's so many other things that we can fill in today. And I think I've become obsessed with the gospel being the answer. The power of the cross is the answer, because all of the things that plague human behavior and relationships are rooted in sin. They're rooted in sin. And the gospel gives absolute answer to all of sin. The cross deals with all of sin. And if we're not willing to go to that place, we can limp along and limp along and limp along. But at the core, it's a sin problem. And sometimes it is the sins of other people that affect us. I'm not saying it's always our own sin, but then it becomes sometimes a resentment thing. And then that sin buries itself in our hearts. And in the same way, we must forgive and release. Always there's something in our hearts that is part of the equation, and the cross gives an answer to. We have generational sins that are so easily passed. I hate the thought of it, but I know there's stuff I've passed to my sons that are just part of the way that my sin nature operates. And I pray by God's grace that they can stand against those things and not have them in any way hold them as slaves. I think we all have them. But the power of the cross allows us to break those too. We're not destined to live those. Galatians 2:20. Last Monday, as I was just sort of beginning to prepare for the sermon this week, I read the devotional from Oswald Chambers for that day, and it began with Galatians 2:20. I am crucified with Christ, yet I live. But it's not I who live. The life that I now live, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. I am crucified with Christ. That is where sin's power is broken at the root. I want to read what Oswald Chambers says about this verse. You can put that up there. I thought this is just really a powerful further explanation of this passage. It is no longer I who live. My individuality remains. I'm still a person, but my primary motivation for living and nature that rules me has radically changed. I have the same human body, but the old satanic right to myself has been destroyed. That's what it means to be crucified with Christ. The old satanic right to myself has been destroyed. I am crucified with Christ. Church, we might find consolation in many things. We will find victory in the cross. Not in any other place. We'll find victory in the cross. It's very interesting at the end of this part of the story that I think there's a symbol, the symbol of the victory being completed over Ai was the king of Ai hanging on a tree. And when he's there hanging on a tree, he is bearing the sin of himself and his city, all of his people, and he's up on that tree, and that whole thing is wiped out completely. It's gone. And I love how these little things are tucked through the Old Testament that point to the gospel, because not so many years later, there was a king hanging on a tree, and it was the end to the power of sin. In this case, it was not his own sin that he bore, but the sins of the whole world. And it also brought an end and brought victory. Think about that correlation. The last part of this model for winning the battle is renewing the covenant. And this is the beautiful part. The battle is over. The enemy has been defeated. But there's still a very, very important step that the nation of Israel needs to take right now. And I just encourage you to let this pattern be part of your life, because I think often we think, well, I need to renew my commitment to Jesus and I need to be close to him so that I can win battles. But the model here is different. It's obey so that you can win battles, but renew your complete devotion to Jesus after the battle is won, because that brings him glory. So we go to verse 30. Then Joshua built on Mount Ebal an altar to the Lord, the God of Israel, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded the Israelites. He built it according to what is written in the book of the law of Moses, an altar of uncut stones on which no iron tool had been used. On it they offered to the Lord burnt offerings and sacrificed fellowship offerings. There, in the presence of the Israelites, Joshua copied on stones the law of Moses, which he had written. all Israel, aliens and citizens alike, with their elders, officials, and judges, were standing on both sides of the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, facing those who carried it. The priests, who were Levites, half of the people stood in front of Mount Gerizim, and half of them in front of Mount Ebal, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded them when he gave them instructions to bless the people of Israel. Afterward, Joshua read all the words of the law, the blessings and the curses, just as it was written in the book of the law. By the way, I went back and looked. So after the 10 Commandments were given in Exodus 20, there's about 4 more chapters that I think is what he's talking about here, which is the law of Moses. So those 4 chapters in Exodus 20 is most likely what Joshua read to them that day. There was not a word of all that Moses had commanded that Joshua did not read to the whole assembly of Israel, including the women and children and the aliens who lived among them. This is the beautiful part of the story. Thank you so much, God, for your faithfulness. You're the one who helps us win battles. And then there's this really important renewal that happens. When I studied the perspectives class, there were some really, really important things that I think God taught me in that. One of them was that throughout all of different societies, as God has revealed himself, and you see this throughout the Old Testament and somewhat in the New, that God, encounters with God include power encounters where he shows his strength like he did here to overcome an enemy. They include truth encounters where God reveals himself through his word, sometimes through his spoken word. And then there are also allegiance encounters where when those other two, when power and truth have been revealed to people, the response is, this is my God. I am all in. I am serving him. I am devoted to him. And I think this last part is an allegiance encounter with a holy God, where they're responding to him and saying, you have acted in power. You have given us truth. And now we will follow you. Psalm 44, I want to read a couple of verses from Psalm 44. This is so beautiful, verses 3 through 8. It was not by their sword that they won the land, nor did their arm bring them victory. It was your hand, your arm, and the light of your face, for you loved them. You are my King and my God, who decrees victories for Jacob. Through you we push back our enemies. Through your name we trample our foes. I do not trust in my bow. My sword does not bring me victory. But you give us victory over our enemies. You put our adversaries to shame. In God we make our boast all day long, and we will praise your name forever. That's such a beautiful declaration that it is God who gives us victory. It is not ourselves. We cannot accomplish it. And here at this allegiance encounter, as the law is read, all of the people are assembled, facing on both sides. There's like a ceremonial procession of the Ark of the Covenant, and there's this honor given to God. But it's carried in a way that the next generation is able to see it and remember, this is why my parents are so devoted to God. He has done this. He has done great things, and he is worthy of our praise. Today I want to do something a little different. Worship team, you guys can come forward. I would like to just take a little moment and have you guys pray together in groups of 2, 3, 4. And this is just a time for you as you look at kind of what does it look like for you to be and feel defeated right now. And for you right now, this may be a moment of joy, because just this week, you engaged with an enemy and you saw incredible power. You saw the power of Christ, and you just want to praise him. But I would just like us to pray together in groups of 3 or 4 for each other. So just find a group and we'll spend maybe 3 or 4 minutes, pray together, and then we'll have our closing song. This also allows you, some of you are new here, it allows you to connect with other people, but spend a little time and pray. And if you have that one thing today that you're just like, man, this thing is kicking me every time, just say it to one person. Say, can you please pray for me? Because I just need somebody to engage in this battle with me. So would you do that? Form little groups for a bit. Pray together. I know that might be a little awkward for some of you, but I hope that it's actually life-giving because prayer is powerful. And then we're going to sing our closing song in 4 or 5 minutes. And you guys can pray up here too if you